Did you see the way they looked at him? Like he was a stray dog that wandered onto their pristine porch? I remember whispering that into the rearview mirror, checking on Alex one last time before merging back onto the interstate. Alex, 8 years old and exhausted from the battle, was finally asleep. The weighted blanket, his only true comfort, tucked tight around his small frame. He was my boy, my beautiful, complicated star, and they had reduced him to a noise complaint. Let me tell you something about the Sterlings, Robert and Eleanor. They didn't just have money, they had heritage money. The kind that smells faintly of old leather, linen, and unspoken judgment. Their wealth wasn't loud, it was quiet, pervasive, and utterly suffocating. And the cabin, that cedar monstrosity with its panoramic lake views, was the physical manifestation of their authority. It was their throne, and we, Alex and I, were the peasants who had dared to track mud on the velvet. "They're just old, Clara," David, my ex-husband, would always say, adjusting his collar, unwilling to see the truth. "They just don't understand." "They don't understand a lot of things, David," I had retorted more than once, like empathy, or basic human decency, but they definitely understand power. And that cabin is their power. David was the weak link in the chain. My main reason for leaving him, a few years before the too loud incident, was his inability to stand up for his own son. He loved Alex, in his quiet, inadequate way, but his fear of disappointing Robert and Eleanor was a bone-deep, crippling paralysis. He was a man forever seeking the silent nod of approval from his father, a nod that never quite materialized. I remember one Christmas dinner, a year or so before the divorce. Alex was maybe 5, still navigating the early diagnosis, and he was rocking gently at the table, a self-soothing rhythm. Eleanor leaned forward, her diamond ring catching the chandelier light. "David, dear, could you perhaps ask Alex to cease that swaying? It's quite distracting." David's face flushed pink. He immediately turned to Alex. "Buddy, come on. Sit up straight. Stop moving." Alex stopped, his eyes wide and wounded. He didn't understand the transgression. It was like asking a person not to blink. I jumped in. "It helps him regulate, Eleanor. It's what we call stimming." She waved a dismissive hand, a gesture that erased years of my maternal effort. "Silly modern labels, Clara. When David was a boy, if he had a nervous habit, we corrected it. He learned to control himself. Children need discipline, not excuses." I looked at David. "Tell her, David. Tell her our son is not broken. Tell her to back off." David cleared his throat, pushing his peas around his plate. He never looked up. He spoke to his dinner. "Mom, it's just how he is sometimes. Let's just try to enjoy the turkey, okay?" That was the epitaph of our marriage. Let's just try to enjoy the turkey, okay? He chose the path of least resistance, every single time. He chose his parents' silent approval over the roar of his son's needs. He traded his own backbone for a seat at their sterile, expensive table. When they finally expelled us from the cabin, demanding we leave because Alex was too loud, David called me 2 hours later. He was still at the cabin. "Clara, look, I'm sorry. Mom and Dad were out of line." His voice was low, careful, as if he was afraid the cedar walls would hear him. I pulled over again. The rage was a physical pressure, like being submerged too deep underwater. "You're sorry? David, your parents just committed an act of emotional violence against your child. They told your 8-year-old son he wasn't fit to be around them, and you sat there eating your damn kale. What was I supposed to do? Yell at them? I'm trying to negotiate here. I told them they were wrong, but if I push too hard, they'll cut us off completely." "What about Alex's college fund, Clara?" I laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. "You think money is the only thing that matters?" "Alex's dignity is worth more than their entire portfolio, David. You chose your parents' comfort over your son's survival. That is a choice. You've been choosing them over us for years. Don't be dramatic, Clara. You're always so dramatic." "Dramatic?" I felt the heat rise in my face, a blush of righteous fury. "I am telling you, David, the only path left for me is the dramatic one. They want quiet, they want order, They want to think they hold the keys to the kingdom? Fine. They kicked us out of their house. I swear to you, David, they will pay a price so steep they won't even see it coming. I will never need their acceptance again. Never. Do you hear me? I hung up before he could respond. He was a distraction, a footnote in the story I was writing for Alex. The only thing left in the rearview mirror, besides the retreating highway lines, was the image of that immaculate, cold-hearted cabin sitting smugly on the shore. I looked at Alex's peaceful face. The vow I had made was not about being accepted. It was about power. Their power was inherited wealth. Mine? Mine was desperation, a mother's ferocious love, and a skill set they always dismissed. They saw me as a whimsical crafter, a woman who fiddled with paint and wood in the garage. Robert once chuckled, "Cute hobby, Clara. Keeps you busy." They thought my hobby was insignificant. They saw my hands as only capable of wiping a messy face or rearranging flowers. They never saw the fire in them. They didn't know that my cute hobby was about to become the hammer that would dismantle their perfect world, one meticulously crafted dollar at a time. The path to revenge, I realized, was paved with fine sawdust and late nights. I had a purpose now, a clarity that felt like a blade being sharpened. I was no longer fighting for a marriage or for acceptance. I was fighting for a piece of land where my son could finally, truly, be loud. My life didn't end when David and I divorced. It simply began. Divorce papers were just the official receipt for a clean break, a severing of the Sterling chain. I took Alex, our meager savings, and the promise I'd made him. We will have a better place. The Sterlings, of course, paid their dues, setting up a modest but obligatory trust fund for Alex, contingent on David's good standing. It was less about caring for Alex, and more about maintaining their narrative of being good people. I refused to touch a cent of it. Their charity felt like a muzzle. What did they think of me? They saw an artist, a dreamer. "Clara will struggle," I overheard Eleanor confidently state to a cousin at David's divorce celebration, which, yes, they held a celebration. "She lacks the necessary steel for business. She's too emotional." They were right about the emotional part. My emotions were the crucible where my steel was forged. That burning shame and blinding rage from the cabin expulsion? I channeled it. It became my fuel. It became the bedrock of the Lake Life Artisan, my online business. Remember my cute hobby? I specialized in upcycled woodcraft and nature-themed home decor. Think reclaimed barnwood tables, custom-designed sensory boxes, and meticulously carved lake maps. It wasn't just crafts, it was American authenticity, the kind they desperately wanted but could only afford to mimic. People were tired of mass-produced plastic. They wanted genuine texture, the smell of pine, the story of salvaged materials. And I, armed with a circular saw and a purpose, gave it to them. I worked like a beast possessed. Alex would be asleep in his small bedroom, and I would be in the garage, the faint, comforting whir of the sander drowning out the silence of my loneliness. I used short, sharp sentences in my head, like Hemingway's clipped dialogue, to keep me focused. Work. Save. Acquire. They will not win. "Mommy, why do you work so much?" Alex asked me one Saturday morning, stacking his colorful wooden blocks, his voice clear and innocent. I put down my coffee mug, which was stained with varnish, and knelt by him. "I'm working to build you a sound, sweetie. A place where your sounds can be the loudest thing in the world." He tilted his head, processing the strange metaphor. "A sound that is safe?" "Exactly," I said, kissing his forehead. "A safe, beautiful sound." My early capital came from scraping by, but the real momentum came from connection. I started sharing my story subtly online, not the full drama, but the why. I talked about the comfort of natural wood, the need for safe, grounding spaces, and how my own child had taught me the value of texture and calm. It resonated. Deeply. Mothers saw their own struggles reflected in my work. People who felt marginalized by their own families recognized the need for a sanctuary. My Instagram following exploded. My online store was perpetually sold out. One afternoon, I was talking to my only true friend, Sarah, a savvy tech executive who saw my potential long before I did. "You're killing it, Clara. Your latest table sold for $4,000. $4,000. Sarah's voice buzzed with excitement over the phone. I was finishing an invoice, my hands sticky with glue. "It's going into the fund, Sarah. The Alex's Cabin Fund. It needs to be heavy." "Wait, you're still serious about buying the Sterling cabin?" Sarah paused. "Clara, that place is probably worth $4 million. Are you working yourself into the ground over a symbolic gesture?" "It's not symbolic, Sarah. It's definitive. It's moral clarity. They told my son he was a mistake. When I buy that cabin, I am buying back his childhood dignity. I am showing him and them that the only thing too much was their cruelty. The thought of it, the ultimate confrontation, the turning of the tables, was a constant dopamine drip. It made the long nights and the burning in my shoulders manageable. It was my North Star. Then, about 3 years into my furious climb, the universe delivered the opening. I was scrolling through the local high-end real estate listings, as I did every night, an exercise in both masochism and motivation, and there it was. Listing number 4478, LC, the Cedar Point Cabin, Robert and Eleanor Sterling's fortress, for sale. My breath hitched. I felt a dizzying coldness spread from my chest to my fingertips. My heart hammered against my ribs like a caged bird frantic for flight. It wasn't just listed. It was listed by a discreet, non-local firm, indicating a quiet, almost desperate sale. I immediately called Sarah. She was my lawyer, my business partner, and my confessor. "They're selling it," I whispered, the words barely making it out. "The cabin? No way. Why? Financial distress, maybe? Their stock portfolio dipped? Or maybe Robert's latest venture finally imploded. It doesn't matter why. It only matters that it's listed. The asking price is $4.5 million. Sarah let out a low whistle. "Clara, your fund is sitting at, what, $1.8 million? That's incredible. But it's not 4.5. I know, but I have credit. I have cash flow. And I have collateral." I looked around my small, bustling garage shop. "I have a track record of selling luxury items to high-net-worth clients. I can secure a loan. But I need you to do the dirty work. No direct contact. No name recognition. This has to be anonymous." "You want me to set up a shell company?" "I want you to be the ghost. They can't know it's me." "Not until the closing table. Not until I can look Eleanor Sterling in the eyes and hand her a cashier's check signed by the woman she called too emotional to succeed." The finality of the vision was intoxicating. "Can you do it, Sarah? Can you be my proxy in the ultimate act of financial spite?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then Sarah's voice came back, firm and businesslike. "Clara, they said your son was too loud. This isn't spite. This is justice. Send me everything. I'll draft the blind offer tonight. We're going in high, clean, and fast. The Sterling's pride is your biggest leverage. They want this quiet. We will give them quiet. Until the last second." The game was on. The goal was no longer about money. It was about the transference of power. It was the moment the pawn on the chessboard finally took the queen. And the Sterlings were about to find out that a mother's rage, combined with impeccable credit, is the most powerful weapon in the American arsenal. It's time, Clara. They accepted the offer, the highest bidder. No contingency on financing. Cash, essentially. Sarah's voice crackled through the phone line 3 weeks later. She sounded exhilarated, like a general who had just won the first major battle. I was sitting in my newly leased, slightly larger workshop, surrounded by the smell of linseed oil and the quiet hum of success. I didn't shout. I didn't even smile wide. The satisfaction was too cold for a grin. It was a deep, quiet realization of power. Cash! I repeated, the word heavy, metallic. The money that came from the hands they dismissed. Did they ask who the buyer was? Robert tried. Sarah chuckled, a dry sound. His lawyer called mine, fishing for a name. My response? The buyer values privacy, Mr. Sterling. The price is sufficient to cover that premium. Robert hates being told no. He hates mystery. He must be vibrating with curiosity. Good, I said. Let him vibrate. That's the sound of the hook sinking in. The legal maneuver was brilliant. Sarah had created an anonymous holding company, the Minnetonka Trust, securing the $4.5 million with a hefty bank loan, using my business assets, my future earnings, the collateral of my talent, as security. The Sterlings, eager for a clean, quick, quiet sale to cover whatever financial embarrassment they were facing, never looked a gift horse in the mouth. They just wanted the money and the problem gone. The closing is set for Tuesday, Sarah confirmed. 9 a.m. sharp. At the title company downtown. They insisted on being present, of course. Robert wants to shake the hand of the idiot who overpaid for their legacy. He'll get to shake a hand, I promised, but he won't forget whose it is. I spent the next few days in a state of suspended animation. I worked my orders, packaged my designs, and every ounce of my concentration was laser-focused on the inevitable Tuesday morning. This wasn't just a transaction. It was a scene, a high-stakes dramatic narrative of my own making. I had to play my part perfectly. On Monday night, David called. He was frantic. Clara, have you heard? They sold the cabin. It's gone. To some trust company. I heard, I said, my voice deliberately flat. They're miserable, completely distraught, and I'm caught in the middle. They keep talking about this massive overpay, how this trust swooped in. They hate that they don't know who bought it. They feel violated. I took a slow breath. This was the moment for the moral dichotomy. They feel violated because they're losing control, David. That's what wealth is to them. Control. They didn't see it as a home. They saw it as a territory where they dictated who was allowed to be quiet and who was too loud. That's unfair, Clara. They built memories there, he protested. And they kicked their own grandson out of those memories. You were there, David, when they told your 8-year-old autistic son to leave because his emotional state disrupted their appetizer course. You remember what I said that day? Silence, heavy and awful. I said they would pay, I finished. They taught me that everything, even dignity, has a price. I listened. I learned. And I worked. Clara, what are you implying? Why are you talking like this? I'm implying nothing, David. Just telling you that some lessons once learned are very expensive. I hung up. He was already irrelevant. His cowardice was his prison. My conviction was my key. Tuesday morning was cool and bright, the kind of crisp Minnesota autumn day that promises clarity. I put on a dress I hadn't worn since before the divorce, a deep sapphire blue, professional but with an undeniable feminine strength. I felt like an iceberg, 7/8 hidden beneath the water, but the 1/8 showing was immaculate, unavoidable. I arrived at the title office exactly on time. Sarah was already there, cool and polished, adjusting the briefcase containing the final documents and the cashier's check. Showtime, she murmured to me. Don't rush it. Let them talk first. Robert and Eleanor Sterling were already seated at the massive oak table. Robert, in a suit that cost more than my first car, was tapping his pen impatiently. Eleanor, in her tailored ivory jacket, looked like she was waiting for a delayed flight, the picture of restrained annoyance. David, predictably, was there, hovering awkwardly in the background, a silent, nervous observer. They didn't look up when I entered. They were looking at Sarah. Ms. Hayes, Robert said, his voice curt. Where is the representative of this trust? Sarah slid into her seat. He's here, Mr. Sterling. The buyer has decided to conclude this transaction personally. I walked around to the end of the table. Their heads snapped up. David's jaw actually dropped. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, processing the impossible visual data. Clara. Here, In this room. Why? Robert, ever the businessman, recovered first, his face darkening from confusion to pure fury. What in God's name is this, Clara? Are you here to serve David more papers? You have no place. I slid into the seat opposite them, placing my hands flat on the polished wood. My wedding ring was long gone, but the ghost of it felt like a brand. I met Eleanor's cold gaze. Hers was the face of absolute shock, frozen in a mask of elegant horror. I am here, Robert, I said, and my voice was calm, steady, and utterly victorious, as the principal of the Minnetonka Trust. I paused, letting the words hang in the air like a guillotine blade. David actually took a step back, bumping into the wall. Robert, his face now a mottled red, sputtered. You? You are the one who overpaid? This is a joke, Clara. Your little craft business, Sarah intervened, placing the thick closing folder between us. The funds are verified, Mr. Sterling. The cashier's check for $4.5 million is sitting right here. She pushed the large, undeniable piece of paper across the table. I tapped the check once with my fingernail, drawing their eyes to the enormous figure. I stared straight at Eleanor. Her mask of composure was cracking. She looked ill. You dismissed my business as a cute hobby, Eleanor, I said, my voice quiet, almost a purr. You underestimated the quiet, furious ambition of a mother who was told her son was too much. You kicked Alex out of that cabin 3 years ago because he was too loud. I leaned forward, my hands still flat on the table, feeling the weight of the revenge settling over me. I didn't buy a cabin today. I bought the right for my son to be as loud as he damn well pleases. I bought the property where you inflicted your cruelty. And now I own it. Sign the papers, Robert. Let's finish the sale. The silence in the room was immense, a vacuum created by the sudden total shift in power. Their faces were a mirror of their ultimate loss, the loss of the property, the loss of control, and the bitter, humiliating loss of dignity to the woman they had cast aside. The victory wasn't just mine. It belonged to Alex, the boy who was finally going to get his safe, loud, beautiful sound. The moment Robert Sterling's pen touched the paper, signing the final deed transfer, felt less like a financial transaction and more like a thunderclap. The air left the room. The only sound was the scratching of the expensive Mont Blanc against the glossy title paper. He signed, his face a mask of impotent rage, his movements jerky. Eleanor didn't say a word, her perfectly composed facade having completely shattered, leaving behind a woman who looked every one of her 70 years. David stood by the wall, pale, utterly silent, a ghost at his own family's financial funeral. Congratulations, Clara, Sarah said, her voice bright, breaking the spell. She handed me the deed, heavy, official, and smelling faintly of new paper. The cabin is officially yours. I didn't even look at the document. My eyes were locked on Eleanor. We need to talk about the closing arrangements, Robert managed, his voice strained, trying to regain control by discussing logistics. We'll need 2 weeks to retrieve the rest of our property. The furniture, the boating equipment. No, I cut him off. Short, sharp, the Hemingway style of dialogue felt right for the moment. You need to be out by 5 p.m. today. Robert surged forward, bracing his hands on the table. That's outrageous. You can't legally. I can, I corrected him, maintaining my calm. The purchase agreement you signed yesterday stipulated that the property would be delivered vacant, with the exception of the items listed in Exhibit C. You negotiated no leaseback or delayed possession clause. We closed on time, under the terms you agreed to. I own the property now, Robert. As of this signature, my possession is immediate. Eleanor finally spoke, her voice a thin, venomous hiss. You planned this entire, despicable spectacle. I planned for my son's safety, Eleanor, I corrected her gently. Your contempt for him, for me, was simply the budget. You bought me the motivation. Now for the furniture. I told Sarah I'd be willing to buy some of the existing pieces, the outdoor set, maybe the dock. I assume David can handle the removal of the rest of your personal items. I glanced at David, who looked ready to faint. It will be a long day for him. He has until 5 p.m. Robert's face was purple. He couldn't explode. Not in a lawyer's office. You cold, calculating little artist. You think this money changes who you are? You'll never be one of us. I stood up. I picked up the deed and put it carefully into my handbag. I looked down at the Sterlings, who were sitting there, utterly defeated. I don't want to be one of you, Robert, I said, my voice dripping with sincerity. I don't want a life built on judging disabled children and valuing silence over truth. I was an artist who made pretty things. You turned me into a woman who builds empires. You made me better. And louder. I turned to David, who finally managed to meet my eyes. His were filled with a pathetic mixture of regret and awe. David, I said, keeping the professional tone, I'm sure you have a key to the cabin. You have until 5. Don't touch the boat dock. I want to inspect that. The rest is your problem. I walked out with Sarah. The last thing I heard was Eleanor muttering, We have been played. It was the greatest compliment she could have ever paid me. That afternoon, I drove Alex to the cabin. It was a clear, exhilarating drive. We pulled up the long gravel driveway, the massive cedar structure dominating the lakefront. This was not just a house. It was the mausoleum of my past pain. The Sterling's Mercedes was parked haphazardly. David was already there, looking exactly how I had pictured him. Defeated, moving their expensive belongings into the back of a rental truck. I got out, helping Alex unbuckle. Clara, what are you doing here? David rushed towards me, his face sweaty, his khakis now wrinkled. I own the place, David. I'm moving in, I said simply. Meet the new owner. Alex, oblivious to the high-stakes financial war, looked up at the enormous house, his eyes wide. Is this ours, Mommy? Can I be loud here? I knelt down, hugging him tight. It is ours, Alex. All of it. And you can be anything you want here. David watched this exchange, his eyes hollow. He's still fragile. Clara, are you sure this environment is right for him? It's so big. It's going to be perfect, I replied, standing up to face him. Because I'm going to tear out every vestige of their cold perfection and rebuild it for him. Tear out? It's immaculate. Immaculate means soulless, David. This cabin needs a heart. Right now, it's a monument to ableism. You look defeated. Why are you helping them? They're still my parents, Clara, and they need this. They lost a lot of capital on this sale. Apparently, their broker messed up. He tried to shift the blame away from their own greed and desperation for a quick sale. The broker didn't mess up, David. They sold to the highest, cleanest bidder. I overpaid on purpose, and that loss of capital is the price of their cruelty. I pointed to a small wooden sign near the dock that read, The Sterling Legacy. Quiet enjoyment only. Take that sign. I need that gone immediately. He flinched, but nodded. Eleanor emerged, carrying an armload of silk pillows. She looked at Alex, then at me, then at the rental truck. She marched over to me, her voice trembling with a mixture of grief and fury. You really did this. To us. To your own family. You lost the right to call yourselves family when you judged my son by the volume of his pain. I fired back, my voice low and dangerous. I was an inconvenience. Alex was a liability. You valued a quiet dinner over your grandson's basic need for acceptance. Now you get neither. She dropped the pillows onto the gravel. You'll never belong here. The house knows who the real owners are. It will reject you. The house is wood and glass, Eleanor. It listens to the person who pays the tax bill. You have 1 hour left. Get your things, or I will have the rest boxed and donated to the nearest charity shop. I turned my back on them. I took Alex's hand. Come on, sweetie, let's go find your sensory room. The real work, the work of healing and reclaiming, was about to begin. The cabin was bought. Now it had to be born again. The Sterlings were gone by 5 p.m., leaving behind a trail of hurried packing boxes. and the lingering scent of their expensive, suffocating regret. Robert had left the key on the kitchen counter with a note. "Enjoy your purchase. You've made a terrible mistake." Eleanor left nothing but a single, perfectly lipstick-stained fingerprint on a window pane, a final, spiteful gesture. David, looking genuinely heartbroken, had lingered, trying to say something about visitation, but I just pointed him toward the door. "You can call my lawyer, David. This is my son's sanctuary now, and you chose your team years ago." As the rental truck pulled away, the silence finally fell. A clean, honest quiet, not the brittle, judged silence the Sterlings maintained. Alex, sensing the change in atmosphere, immediately let go of my hand and started exploring. He didn't run. He traced the perimeter, his fingertips brushing the cold cedar walls, his eyes wide and curious. I stood in the center of the massive, cathedral-ceiling living room where the meltdown had occurred. It was still exactly as the Sterlings had left it, stiff, museum-like, the furniture placed for visual perfection, not human comfort. The whole place felt like it was holding its breath. "It needs color, Mommy," Alex murmured, looking at the beige-on-beige palette. "And soft things." "It's going to get soft things, sweetie," I promised. "And loud colors. And whatever sounds you want." The real transformation began the very next morning. This wasn't just renovation. It was exorcism. I immediately brought in my team, a local contractor who specialized in green design, and Sarah, who handled the legal aspects of permits and the constant low-level harassment from Robert Sterling's lawyers trying to claim furniture they accidentally left behind. "What are we doing first, Clara?" the contractor Mike asked, looking around the pristine two-story great room. "We're ripping out the marble fireplace," I announced. Mike blinked. "The 20-foot Italian marble? That's $100,000 right there, Clara." "It's cold," I said simply. "We're replacing it with a full-wall art installation. Textured wood planks, reclaimed from an old Wisconsin barn, stained in warm blues and greens. It needs to be a focal point that's soothing, not intimidating, and we're taking out every single hard surface in Alex's wing. Wall-to-wall cork flooring, soundproofing in the ceiling and the walls. My crowning achievement, though, was the sensory sanctuary. I took what had been Eleanor's rigidly formal Lakeview study, the room where David had been disciplined as a child, and I turned it into Alex's haven. I described the vision to Mike. I want one wall to be a fiber-optic light curtain, soft, shifting colors. I want a floor-to-ceiling swing, anchored securely for vestibular input. And I want the entire room lined with custom-built sensory panels, different textures, weighted pockets, things to touch, things to pull. You're basically building a therapeutic jungle gym in a multi-million-dollar home, Mike observed, scratching his head. I am building a home where a child can regulate his nervous system, I corrected him, where he can be safe from the world, where he can be loud without judgment. During the demolition, a moment of profound symbolism occurred. We were tearing down a wall between two small, unnecessary guest bedrooms to create one enormous sun-drenched art studio for Alex and me. The hammer struck the drywall and something fell out. A small, tarnished silver spoon engraved with the initials R.S., Robert Sterling. I picked it up. It felt like a relic of their suffocating history. I walked over to the garbage skip, still filled with debris from the marble fireplace, and tossed it in. "That's where their legacy belongs," I told Alex, who was watching me curiously. "In the trash." 3 months later, the cabin was unrecognizable. The immaculate fortress was now the loud sanctuary. The cool, sterile blues and grays were replaced by earthy textures, warm wood tones, and saturated color accents. The soundproofing worked wonders. When Alex had a bout of pure, joyful excitement, a spontaneous burst of noise that would have earned us the Sterling's glacial stare, he could let it rip. The sounds stayed within his walls, contained and safe. One evening, I watched him in the sensory sanctuary. He was gently rocking in his swing, the fiber optics shimmering over his face, a look of profound peace settling over his features. He was humming, a happy, unrestricted sound. The peace was broken by a call from Sarah. "Clara, David is escalating. He's filed an emergency motion demanding visitation at the cabin. He claims you're withholding his right to see Alex in his natural environment and accuses you of creating an unstable, overstimulated environment with the renovations. Unstable? My victory high evaporated, replaced by cold fury. He's siding with them again, isn't he? He's using their language, yes. He's saying your use of the cabin is a provocation, and that the sensory room is unnecessary indulgence. I looked at Alex, humming softly, finally at rest. I walked into the kitchen, the cork floor muffling my steps. Sarah, I want you to tell David's lawyer this, word for word. The cabin's natural environment was defined by the Sterlings as a place where Alex's disability was unacceptable. The new environment is a place built on the principle that Alex is perfect, exactly as he is. David Sterling had the chance to protect that right, and chose silence. He will not step foot in this house to judge my son again. His visitation rights will remain at the designated neutral location. If he pursues this motion, I will file a detailed written deposition outlining every instance of his parents' documented ableism, his refusal to intervene, and how that trauma necessitated the purchase of the property. I will make this a matter of public record. I paused, picturing David's face crumbling under the weight of his parents' disapproval. The Sterlings value their pristine reputation above all else. David knows that. Tell him his choice is between his parents' quiet approval and his son's peaceful sanctuary. He cannot have both. The phone call ended. David's motion was quietly dropped the next day. The silence from the Sterling family was more satisfying than any shout. The ultimate power move was not the purchase itself, but the transformation of the house from a symbol of their control into a monument to my love. The walls had ears, and for the first time in his life, this house was finally listening to Alex. The threat worked. David retreated, not because he feared me, but because he feared the public glare on his parents' reputation. The Sterlings valued their image, the foundation on which their entire legacy was built, more than they valued access to their grandson. The silence that followed was total. It was the white flag of surrender, signed in the currency of shame. 6 months after the final closing, the cabin was complete. It was vibrant, warm, and above all, functional. The massive great room, once a mausoleum of quiet taste, now hosted laughter that echoed against the reclaimed wood walls. Alex, thriving in his tailored environment, was more relaxed, more verbal, and more confident than I'd ever seen him. His meltdowns, once explosive and terrifying, were now rare, manageable events. He knew he had a safe harbor, a sensory sanctuary where he could ride out the storm. I stood on the enormous cedar deck, the one the Sterlings had used for their pristine cocktail parties, watching Alex skim rocks across the glittering lake. He was humming happily, a joyful, unrestricted sound that traveled across the water. This was the sound I had bought. This wasn't just a win for us. It was a profound truth about what really matters. They thought I bought a cabin. I bought peace. I had always known that my victory couldn't be purely about personal revenge. The redemption had to be bigger. It had to serve a purpose beyond my own satisfaction. I called Sarah over for a long overdue glass of wine on the newly built dock, the one I had explicitly forbidden David from touching. "So the Sterlings haven't tried anything else?" Sarah asked, sipping her wine. "Nothing. David sends an email once a month, stilted, formal, asking about Alex's school. I reply through you. Eleanor and Robert? Silent as the grave. They are living with the ultimate embarrassment. The woman they dismissed became the owner of their most prized possession, and she did it by turning their cruelty into capital." "And you deserve every ounce of that satisfaction," Sarah affirmed. "But it's not enough," I said, looking out at the sunset, painting the sky in fiery orange and deep violet hues. "This cabin is 4,000 square feet of prime real estate. Alex and I only need a quarter of it. I've decided what the next step is." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial level. "I'm going to use the property as a retreat center. We're calling it the Loud Sanctuary Project. I'll offer 2 weeks a summer, pro bono, to single mothers of neurodivergent children. Families that need this exact kind of space, soundproofed, sensory-rich, judgment-free. They will stay here, where the Sterlings decreed silence, and they will be allowed to be gloriously, wonderfully loud. Sarah set down her glass. Her eyes were shining. Clara, that's brilliant. It turns the whole thing from a revenge story into a legacy of acceptance. Exactly. Robert and Eleanor Sterling's most valuable asset is now a safe space for the very people they scorned. Their money built the walls, and my love tore them down and rebuilt the interior. The only way to truly win against cruelty is to build something beautiful in its place. The first family arrived that summer, a mother named Lisa and her son, Leo, who had severe nonverbal autism. Lisa was exhausted, the kind of deep, bone-weary exhaustion only a mother fighting the world for her child understands. The first time Leo entered the sensory sanctuary, he went rigid, unsure. Then he spotted the floor-to-ceiling swing. He climbed on, and for 20 minutes he swung, high, fast, and completely unrestrained. When he got off, he looked at his mother, and for the first time that day, he smiled. Later that week, Lisa found me on the porch, crying soft, grateful tears. I haven't slept like this in 10 years, Clara. I haven't heard him make that many happy noises outside in public without someone staring at us. He is free here. He is home, I told her. This was the true payoff. Not the deed, not the shock on Eleanor's face, but the sight of a child finally feeling safe enough to be himself. The sound of acceptance. The irony of the Sterlings' original statement was now complete. They had expelled Alex because he was too loud. Now I was using the fruits of my labor, the financial empire grown from my hands, to actively invite others to be loud too. Their legacy of quiet exclusion was overwritten by my mandate of noisy, joyful inclusion. I finally found myself at true peace. The revenge had paved the way for the sanctuary. I had fought for my son, and in doing so, I had purchased a piece of the American dream, the right to define my own safety and success, on my own terms. The money was simply the weapon. The love was the victory. So if you've ever been told you're too much, too loud, or too complicated for someone else's perfect picture, remember this. The people who judge your volume are usually the ones terrified of your voice. Get loud. Get focused, get clear on your purpose, and if you need to, go buy their damn cabin. Now, as the sun finally dips below the horizon on Lake Minnetonka, and I hear the sound of Alex laughing, that full, resonant, beautiful noise, I want to hear from you. Have you had an experience with ableism or being dismissed by your family? What was the moment you realized your hobby was your true superpower? Drop a comment below and share your story. Let's make some noise together in this comment section. And if you enjoyed this journey of vengeance and redemption, don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend who needs a little dose of righteous fury, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to Behind Closed Doors. We've got more secrets to uncover, and trust me, you won't want to whisper through the next one.